Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad and Nicole.
Today we're talking about the Scofflaw cocktail, which is a Prohibition-era cocktail invented in Paris, France. The cocktail contains rye or bourbon, dry vermouth, grenadine, lemon juice, and orange bitters. And although the recipe varies quite a bit with different proportions of all the ingredients, we are going to make a variation of this today.
Yep.
The origins of the cocktail and its name are very closely tied to Prohibition. For those of you who, obviously you know what Prohibition is, but many of you may not know that it actually lasted for 13 years. It started in January 1920 and ran until December of 1933. So you can imagine that the nationwide ban on the sale and distribution of alcohol wasn't looked upon happily by many across the country, and people continued to obtain and consume alcohol various ways. Organized crime got heavily involved in illegally producing and transporting liquor throughout this period of time.
Yep. And we also know that alcohol quality dropped significantly in the U.S. And that led to had some various influences on cocktail recipes and things like that. But one other effect was prompted by the efforts of a certain Del Severe King, who was a wealthy banker and a very avid temperance advocate. And temperance was the movement that, to ban alcohol, and that succeeded at the point that they passed the amendment to create Prohibition. Mm-hmm. But 4 years in, he was not satisfied because so many people were continuing to consume alcohol. And so he decided to start a nationwide contest to come up with a derogatory term for people who continued to drink alcohol and flout the law of Prohibition. So he set up this contest, and they actually received 25,000 different submissions for terms. The winning entry, or I should say entries, because actually two people entered the same term, was the word Scofflaw, which was announced as the winner in January of 2024. The prize was $200, which today is about $3,000, and was split by the two winning submissions. Now, of course, within a week of the contest completion, some wag at a Parisian bar created a cocktail and dubbed it the Scofflaw in mocking honor of the contest and its results. And of course, here's a drink named to make fun of people who are trying to ban alcohol. The two bars are listed as the possible home of the Scofflaw. One is Maxim's, and the other is Harry's New York Bar, both in Paris. Now, most sources credit Harry's bar, and that is a very famous cocktail spot in Paris that has been credited with the creation of many other classic cocktails, including the French 75, the Sidecar, the Monkey's Gland, and the Bloody Mary. Now, it may not have actually invented all of them, but is certainly credited with either inventing or popularizing those drinks.
Right. So the bar itself, Harry's New York Bar in Paris, France, the bar started in 1911 as the New York Bar. So it was a joint venture between two Americans, a celebrity jockey named Todd Sloan, and a bar owner from Manhattan by the name of Clancy, whose bar apparently was dismantled and shipped over to Paris. So they hired
Give that real authentic New York bar feel.
Right.
Why not just send it?
They hired a man by the name of Harry McAlone, who was a Scotsman. He had tended bar in London for some time and as their head barman, so he knew his way around a bar. So the New York bar became a super popular destination in Paris for members of the American Ambulance Corps during World War I.
Yep.
But one of the owners, Sloane's lavish spending and financial problems led to the sale of the bar in 1923. So the new owner was barman Harry himself, who added his name to the bar, now known as Harry's New York Bar in Paris, France. And he also made it the legendary landmark that it is today. And it's still there.
Yeah. And still owned by I believe his like grandson's widow or something like
Right,
that.
it's
So his
still in the
family
family.
kept it in the business in the family. And in addition to the drinks credited at the bar, credited with being created at the bar, it became very popular with American and other international celebrities visiting Paris, and was frequented over the years by the likes of Knute Rockne, Ernest Hemingway, never met a bar he didn't like, Coco Chanel, Humphrey Bogart, Rita Hayworth, Edward, the Duke of Windsor, after he abdicated, and more recently, Daft Punk.
They are French.
That's true. And the Ivory's Piano Bar at Harry's is also where George Gershwin composed An American in Paris in 1928. And finally, we have to mention that in the short story A View to a Kill, our old buddy James Bond fondly recalls having visited Harry's bar at age 16, which apparently started a memorable evening that ended with him losing both his wallet and his virginity.
Oh. On that note, so let's turn our attention to the Scofflaw drink itself. Rye was a preferred spirit, although some recipes will call for bourbon. The original drink almost certainly called for Canadian rye whiskey, given American rye would not have been available at the time. So we are going to go ahead and use
Rye.
rye.
Yep. American rye in this case, but
We are also using dry vermouth, also known as French vermouth, as we've mentioned. It would have been readily available in Paris in 1924, so that's likely what was used. We've talked about the history of vermouth quite a bit in our Martinez episode, so we won't get too into that, but if you want to learn more, you can go find that there. We are also including grenadine. So grenadine is a popular cocktail ingredient that we haven't talked about too much and haven't really dealt with before, so we can discuss that a bit.
yeah, so you probably know grenadine as a bright red, sweet, I think most people say cherry flavored syrup. But you should be aware that many of the mass-produced grenadines today are basically artificially flavored and artificially colored, and mostly based on high fructose corn syrup. Now you can find more organic versions of grenadine that are naturally flavored based on cane sugar, but you might want to look for that if you go and buy grenadine at the store. Now the origins of grenadine are a bit murky, but the name comes from the French word for pomegranate, which is grenade. Looks like grenade in English, but it's derived from the French word granatum, the Latin word granatum, which means seeded. And that's a reference to obviously the large number of seeds wrapping the actual meat, the fruity meat of the pomegranate. Now, originally grenadine was made from pomegranate juice, sugar, and water, and its use in cocktails appears to start in Europe, as it shows up in French cocktail manuals in the mid-1890s. Now, by 1930, it had become a staple in many cocktails in England and the US as well, and it seems to have supplanted the earlier use of raspberry syrup, gum syrup, or other sweet fruit-based syrups. Harry Craddock's Savoy cocktail book has about 100 different recipes with grenadine in it, and that was published in 1930. So in any case, it's no surprise that grenadine is found in a cocktail from France from 1924.
So, by the way, our good pal Harry Craddock, he's sometimes erroneously credited with the invention of the Scofflaw cocktail, possibly in the telling over time. Two Harrys being involved got confusing in all of the retellings. And in any case, our version looks a lot like his version, where we bump up the rye a little bit to make it work better for our American modern palate.
So we're calling our version the Breaking the Law, either in honor of Judas Priest or Beavis and Butthead, whichever you prefer.
So we like this version because it allows some of the dryness of the vermouth to remain in the drink, which helps differentiate the flavor from that of a standard whiskey sour, which this resembles a bit if you increase the lemon juice and the grenadine a bit.
Yeah,
further.
in flavor, it comes out a lot like a whiskey sour if you up those a lot. So we try to dial it back just enough to give you still a little hint of that dry vermouth and give it a slightly different flavor profile. Now, we're using a homemade grenadine that incorporates pomegranate juice, sugar, pomegranate molasses, and orange flower blossom water. And we really recommend making your own pomegranate-based grenadine. It's rich and a little tart, along with the sweetness, and just has a lot more flavor.
You can really see the color differentiation between the homemade version and the store-bought version.
Yep. And for us, the store-bought versions taste a lot like artificially sweetened cherry cough syrup. But if you do use a store-bought grenadine, you might actually want to use a little bit less in the drink so it doesn't overpower the drink. Maybe a 1/4 ounce instead of a 1/2 ounce in this build.
Since it is very sweet.
Yes. There's some question as to when did grenadine transform from being sort of based on pomegranate juice to some other concoction, and that's not entirely clear. It actually may have been fairly early on, near the turn of the century, of the 20th century, when pomegranate was actually fairly rare in Europe and hard to obtain, and so they may have already started making grenadine more from black currant or other fruits at that time, and that may have started on this path where it actually went in this whole direction of simply being a red or purple fruity syrup, right, and not necessarily based directly on pomegranate. But so probably the version 1924 wasn't actually pomegranate based. But anyway, we like ours so much we're going to use it today anyway. So we can start making the drink.
Let's do it.
All right. So first up is the rye that we're using. Today we're using Rittenhouse Bottled in Bond, which is a nice, fairly accessible and affordable rye. It is slightly higher proof at 50% alcohol rather than 42 to 46 that most standard ones. That's Bottled in Bond is actually a kind of grade that says that it's higher proof. So I'm going to put in 3 ounces of this to make 2 cocktails worth.
It would be interesting to experiment with different types of rye.
Yep. We did try a couple different ryes, but that wasn't the main thing that we were testing for. We were kind of testing different vermouths and different concentrations of the grenadine and the lemon, just to see where we could get the flavor at. Like, one version had very little grenadine and very little lemon, and it was kind of nasty, honestly. So this version is a lot better than some of the ones that we tried along the way.
Well, and even the different kinds of dry vermouth were very, very different.
That is true, absolutely. So in terms of dry vermouth, we're using Dolin Dry, which is one of the classic French vermouth houses, along with Neuilly Prat. So you're using the Dolin Dry. I'll put in 2 ounces of the Dolin Dry.
We tried it with the Carpano dry.
Yeah,
and
we
we
didn't-
like it.
Didn't like
So,
it as much.
Experiment and find what you like,
Yep.
but we tended to like this version a lot better.
All right, and then we're going to use an ounce total for 2 drinks of our pomegranate grenadine. Like I said, use a little bit less if we're using the store-bought version, and then
I'm gonna pour that into your.
Yep.
Here, I'll do it.
I'll strain
Keep
it.
talking.
Okay, just fill it halfway there. You don't need to strain it. We'll strain it on the way out.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. All right, so then we put in our fresh squeezed lemon juice. We strain when we finish the drink because we want the pulp in here.
That's true.
Because the pulp actually has some
Break
interesting.
down a little bit.
Yeah, and it's got some interesting like fibers or proteins. I can't remember exactly that sort of
Gives
help
it some-
thicken the drink and give it a little bit of body.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last ingredient is the orange bitters. We're using Angostura orange bitters this time around, which have kind of a nice spice to them. So it'll complement the spice of the rye. And putting in a 1/4 teaspoon that's our measure of 2 dashes there. And then of course, since this is a citrus-based drink, not only will we be shaking, but we're also adding for those who watch our show regularly, we know we are adding our saline solution, 2 drops of saline to help kind of bring forward that tartness and the sweetness in the citrus and cut down the bitterness. All right, I think that is ready to go.
Great. Ice is right there.
Ice in a bowl here. All right. And since this ice is a little wetter than we normally use, because it's been out for a bit, we will not have to shake as long to get the right dilution, and we'll just be satisfied when we get it cold enough. And then we'll put a little bit more. And then we have, of course, our coops chilling in the fridge, if you'd like to bring those out. All right. I think we're ready to roll on the shaking. So I'll probably shake for about 15 to 20 seconds this time because the ice was wetter than coming straight out of the fridge. If you're coming straight out of the fridge, you might need to go a little bit longer. Give it some nice vigorous shaking.
Get the shake face going.
Yeah. All right. Feels pretty cold. I think we're in a good spot. So I will ready to go. And now I will use the strainer. So we call it double straining because it's going through the cocktail strainer and my little mesh strainer. And that'll keep out the seeds and the ice chips and any other particulates that the shaking has brought out. Well, we got a lot of pulp in this one because that strainer is working overtime. Awesome.
This is why we double strain.
That's right.
And we're garnishing with a lemon peel. We've cut it nice and thin, not to get any of the white
And
rind in there.
This time we will just express it and not actually leave it on the glass.
Oh, okay.
Because the drink is already pretty citrus forward. This is just to give it a little brightening on top.
I think it's quite pretty with it on there.
All right. Feel free.
I'm gonna put mine on it.
Feel free, babe. All right. And there we have our drink. Now, in some of the pictures, we see it coming out rather pinkish. I don't know how much grenadine they put in there or if that's like the artificial coloring. Ours come out a nice, pretty rye, pretty, amber rye color with, I don't know, not pink.
Not bright pink, no.
Like some of the photos you'll see online. So, but let's see how it is.
Good.
Yeah, it's good.
It's nice.
I think you get a lot on the backside. You can still taste a bit of the dry vermouth, which is nice. You don't want it just to be too much lemon and too sweet. You want to get some of the fact that there is some dry vermouth underneath there as well. I think with these proportions, you can get that. All right. Well, hope you're enjoying your scofflaw or breaking the law in some other interesting
it's
way.
Breaking the law.
Breaking the law in some other interesting way. Enjoy your vices, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.